What's up, guys, and welcome back to Moan Inc. If you guys are new here, then hello. My name is Erica, and it is an absolute pleasure to have you joining me today on the channel. Because for today's video, as you can see from the title, I am chatting to the lovely Katie of Helpful History. Now, the Helpful History username is massive. And I say username specifically because Katie has expanded Helpful History to not only TikTok and Instagram, but also to YouTube and podcasting. Literally whatever platform you want, type in Helpful History and you will be able to find Katie. And the amazing thing that I've always admired about Katie is that she's one of the only creators that changes her content for each platform. And that was really what I invited her to the channel to talk about. I wanted to really rack her brain about how she learned each platform, about how she managed to curate different images of what Helpful History was in order to garner a bigger audience. And I mean, we are talking hundreds of thousands of followers cross-platform, millions of views, huge companies. I mean, even like Hollywood films have reached out to Katie to help them promote. Right? She is so good at looking at social media and figuring out what that algorithm wants and what people want on each platform, and has been able to morph herself, not herself necessarily, but being able to morph Helpful History into exactly what people want on each platform. And I really thought that I was going to sit down with her today and leave with like a step-by-step guide of how we can all do that, right? I wanted to get advice from Katie as well. And instead what I discovered is an incredibly ambitious woman, but in a very different way. So throughout this conversation, you will see us change from talking about social media to suddenly figuring out what Katie's passion is and what Katie's drive is. And that's when I really got interested. When I started to uncover that Katie behind the Helpful History name and behind that brand, I really feel excited to see how Katie's career unfolds. And I really think that she is probably one of the biggest people to watch in this industry. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this conversation as much as I enjoyed having it. And thank you to Katie for taking time out of her absolutely manic day to sit down and chat with me, and then have us all share this conversation together and have you guys come in and listen to what she had to say as well. As we chat, all of Katie's links will be left in the description below. So do not be shy to go and give her a follow on any of the Helpful History usernames on whatever platform you prefer. But in saying all of that, let's hand it over to Katie explaining her history background and what really got her excited and passionate about the subject in the first place.
Well, I always loved history in school. And then when I got to my A-levels, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I thought classics combined like history, music, arts kind of things. So I went for that. And I also loved Percy Jackson. And at uni, I did a lot of Greek mythology, gender, artsy things. And then since leaving, I've ended up at a Roman museum. And I remember when I went back for graduation, it was like, oh, I'm a traitor. I've gone to the Romans rather than the Greeks. So that's where a lot of my videos tend to focus on, just because I'm surrounded by that every day. But I remember growing up, I liked the Tudors, and the first like proper history book I asked my parents to get me was in Costco. And I've got it. Let me show you it.
No
I know
way.
it's random. So this is the first book, and I liked Henry VIII. So it's just got loads of different kings. Like it has ancient ones, and it's got like Ramesses.
I love that you still have it. That's my favorite part of this whole story.
Yeah. So this is the beginning of history love, I suppose.
So if you like the Tudors, then how does that switch to classics? Like, how do you go from Tudors to further back?
Because all you do in school, I didn't go to like a private school or anything, so all you do is Tudors, World War, and then I did a module on like Margaret Thatcher, and I was like, this is just not. I enjoyed, obviously I like the Tudors, but when it's all you then study, it's like I wanted something different. So that's why for my degree I was like, I'm gonna go ancient, switch it up.
So then you go to Roehampton to get your degree, right?
Yeah.
So how was that then? How was that switch going from just like reading Percy Jackson, reading this huge history book, loving the Tudors, pushing it back to then everything is classics?
It was difficult. A lot of obviously most people in my lectures had done it all before. They'd done it for A level, and I was just sat there like, oh my God. And I had one friend that hadn't done it before, and it made me feel a bit better. Because the whole, like, you go to uni to enjoy it. You're going to study something you want and you find interesting and it's fun. So I think it felt like starting fresh, and that's why it was a bit more fun and it was easier to learn because I wasn't just sat there learning about the same king and the same painting. It was all new to me, and it was really, yeah, it's just interesting to learn something different, I think.
Like, did you have to do languages as well?
I did Latin in first year, um, which I can't remember very much of. I can remember bits, like I can work out inscriptions still, but like bits of it.
So having that one person then that, if you're doing Latin, you're also not only doing history that's new and that's exciting, but also languages. To have at least one person going through that with you must have been such like thank I was going to swear, but probably shouldn't do that. So, thank God.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It was a relief because yeah, everyone just instantly knew what they were talking about. Like we do the Aeneid, or the Aeneid, however you want to say it, which I hadn't read before uni, and then they all knew all the like analysis and everything before, and I was just there like, oh, this is cool, this is like new, but they all just had it in their brains already. So then having that one friend that was like, don't worry, I'm learning too. It was like, okay, it's fine. But that's sort of why I like my social channels, because I feel like I'm that friend for people, because I think I do it a easy way rather than a lot of like academic
You
social media people.
absolutely do. Like you're such a good stepping stone for like multitude of different reasons, which I want to talk about. But setting up the social media channels,
Mhm.
how does that then play into this? Because you get your degree in classics, and
Mhm.
then what happens after that? Because you don't go into higher education then after that, do you?
No, I was
So we're
done.
like the same.
That's
There we
my-
go.
yeah. Yeah. What is it? A BA. I had that, and then I was like, no, I'm good now.
Me, literally. I was like, I'm
Yeah.
done. I got it.
Yeah. I did it. It's fine. So I graduated, but I always say uni finished because it was in March 2020. So I don't feel like I graduated. It just like ended and it was like, bye-bye. um, so it was at that time, and we all just had to leave and do our dissertations and carry on. Um, so then I was working at McDonald's, and I was like, oh my God, I need to do something else. So I thought if I started social media, at least that gave me something to do, but also a bit of experience. Because when I was applying to museums, it was like, sorry, you've just got no experience. Obviously, I couldn't volunteer because it was COVID. So I thought that gives me some sort of, it shows I care about history.
So which social media did you gravitate towards first then? Because you're on everything, which is amazing. Like, I think you're probably the most, can I say, like cross-pollinated, like history, like content creator, which is amazing. So which one was the first one that you were like, oh, we'll go here first and then we'll expand later?
Yeah, so I started on TikTok, and then because I'm quite quiet, I get the comments like, please start like relaxing videos and like ASMR, which I didn't want to become an ASMR person. Obviously, I'm for the history, but people were asking for that. So I was like, well, if I start that on YouTube, then it branches out, it sort of spreads the audiences, but because I know it's all the same audience, but they're different on TikTok and YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think the longer format, more chill, chatty videos is obviously YouTube, and then TikTok is where I try to be a bit more like, look at this. But it doesn't really work, so I'm not that kind of person. But yeah, so I started on TikTok and then YouTube, and Instagram just sort of happens. I feel like you never intend to. I don't know how you feel, but I feel like Instagram just sort of has to happen because everyone's on there, and you're like, okay, I need to be on there.
I wonder
Um,
how Instagram feels knowing that, because I agree. It's like you just kind of
yeah,
have to have one of those because
yeah,
that's where all the ages are, as opposed
yeah,
to just like one age
yeah,
group. But I bet you
yeah.
Instagram don't like that very much. That we're like, it's just there.
Well, I think it's a good thing though, because it's the biggest like cross section of audience that you get, but then it's also more difficult to tailor content because you're like, well, who am I aiming for on here?
Absolutely. Did you find it easier to grow on TikTok versus YouTube, or because it was, like you said, it was the same audience, but also kind of different because you were doing different styles of videos?
Mm.
Was there a discrepancy in growth between the platforms at all?
It was last summer when my TikTok started to really like gain traction, and that's when everyone was commenting like, please start YouTube, blah blah blah. So I did that, and I instantly had like 8,000 followers. So I think TikTok is the sole reason I have so many on YouTube now, because since then it has slowed down. See, I don't know, because TikTok was my first, so it was the hardest to build an audience on. Whereas then, as soon as I started posting on Instagram, everyone was just there. But I don't really know which one was the easiest to gain those followers on, because they just followed me from TikTok.
So then when it comes to growing on TikTok, I think so many people now, like I do not do TikTok, so I can't give any advice on this at all. And people are always like asking me to go on TikTok, and then I show up for like a few days and I'm like, oh, no, I'm bored. I don't like this anymore. And then I leave. It's just not much. Like I'm very chatty, very rambly. So I need YouTube. That's the platform that suits me. But TikTok is obviously the most popular one. And it's the one that I feel like, especially classics people gravitate towards to kind of get those small sound bites of, you know, history can be fun in, well, now a minute for 15 seconds or whatever. So is there any advice that you would give to somebody that heard, you know, or knows you from TikTok and is also kind of like, oh, I kind of want to get on there? Like, what's something that you can tell them that might help them get over that sort of hump of like, you know, when you hit 1,000 followers and it just kind of stabilizes at that and you're like, why would you do that?
Yeah, I'm currently stuck there. I'm like stuck at a steady following, and it's not like it's not going either way, so it's a good thing. So I look at a lot of like what are they called? They're like creator, not agents, but that kind of person who gives you advice. So I'm just going to repeat what they say and what I've found useful. So when I first started, obviously I didn't really know social media. I didn't know what worked on TikTok, but you will eventually just find what works for you. And I think, like I say, I tried to be like, look at me, haha, I'm really loud and but that doesn't work because that's not me. And I think people can tell, and I know it's a cliche, but be your like authentic self, and it's easier for you and it's easier for your audience to find you as well, and they'll appreciate that. And then finding your niche as well. So obviously mine's history, but I do like, I'll say a random history thing and it'll be a really short video. Short form is the way to go as well. Yeah, finding your niche and your style is definitely important on TikTok, because like you say, on YouTube you can just chat and everyone loves the chat, but on TikTok it's like you have 7 seconds, otherwise they scroll. And if they know your format and they know what's going to happen, I think it's easier for the audience. So I think, like, I start a lot of my videos with, would you like to see? And they're like, yes, I would. Even if you find like a little phrase that works for you, I think that's the way to go with TikTok.
And your videos on TikTok, like your short form, I watch most of them on YouTube, on Instagram even, I won't lie. That's where mostly I see your videos, because I don't scroll on TikTok, because I do get sucked into the doom scrolling, whereas on Instagram I don't.
Big time.
Now, you seem to film like multiple videos though in one go, which is obviously the best way to go about it. But how do you plan those? Like, do you know ahead of time where you're going and what you're doing? Or is it kind of a combination of doing that, but then also seeing fun things and being like, oh, maybe I'll do that?
So on Instagram, I do it a bit differently to TikTok. So TikTok would just be, I would film just sat here in my room and I would say something random about history. Whereas Instagram, I think, is more considered, like your followers think about it a bit more. Whereas on TikTok, you're scrolling, you'll follow, you'll see a video, fine. But Instagram, you want to see the people that you want to see. Like, you've curated your own little like people you follow and you want to see their content. So for Instagram, I take it a bit more seriously than TikTok. So if I'm going somewhere that I know is historical or is like, you know, a house or a garden with some sort of statue, I've got a little notebook that fits in my little handbag, and I'll write like an intro, because you'll notice in a lot of my videos when I'm talking, I just say the intro on camera and then it's voiceover of like B-roll. So I make sure I've got one of those, and then it depends again what I'm doing. Like if I'm going with my family, I'm only going to do that. Whereas if I'm going with a friend who is like, yeah, we'll film some stuff, I'll write a few more videos. So yeah, I do plan in advance. But then if I just go along somewhere and I see something, I'll just get a load of B-roll and voiceover entirely. But I think on Instagram, when I'm on camera presenting that first bit, it goes down a bit better. So yeah, I do prep the content for there a lot. Yeah.
So you mentioned that you're quiet, which, you know, the ASMR videos on YouTube and all that sort of stuff. How else would you describe yourself just as a person? Not like Katie online, but Katie as a person. Can you have like 2 other words that would like describe you?
I think I'm quite not silly, but maybe easygoing. I don't know, because I like to do something daft. Like if I'm filming a video, I'll like to like pop up from something, just a bit daft. Maybe that's the word. I don't really know. I am like, okay, we won't go with awkward, but we'll go with shy. And whenever I'm a very shy person, and this whole social platform has really pushed me out of my comfort zone. And I would say to anyone, if you want to do something and you want to get somewhere in life, you have to just go for it and ignore the fact that it makes you feel sick with anxiety. Like, just go for it and try your best. And something will come of it, something good will happen. Because every time I go and film, like I filmed for the National Trust and Find My Past and at the London Dungeon with some of their team, and I was really, really scared the whole time. But I did it, and I'm really proud of what I've done. And I think that's what this platform has done for me. So yeah, we'll go with shy, but this has like brought me out of my comfort zone massively.
So that's not an easy thing to do, though. You should definitely pat yourself on the back, because if you're naturally a shy person, to not only say, I want to talk in front of people, but also say, I want to film myself and talk in front of people. So now there's a record that I've done it. That's a huge step. So was the motivation behind that because, you know, you wanted to work in museums and you needed that? Well, obviously not with the London Dungeon, like that then comes later, but to start this whole thing off, was it because you needed the experience that really pushed you into sort of facing that fear?
It was needing experience, but also it was lockdown. I was bored. I needed something to do. And I love history and I wanted to share it with people, and making it accessible as well is obviously hugely important. And social media does that and it's brilliant for that. And I, as I said, I'm just like, I'm not as shy on social media as I am in real life, I think, because it's the same as like online bullying. You can hide behind a phone, you can hide behind a screen. So like I'm talking to you right now, but in reality I'm sat in my room on my own with a phone. Whereas it's different to like if I had carried on in education and become a lecturer, I could not talk in front of a room of people, which is daft because I put videos out there to thousands of people every day, but it doesn't feel the same because they're not real. Like they're in a phone. Maybe that's not the right thing to say about my followers, but
No,
it's not
no,
that
I
doing it.
completely understand that, because I feel the same way. Like oftentimes I get surprised by my view count because like you, I'm filming in my bedroom. Like people can
Yeah,
see my bed. So
yeah,
that's all I'm seeing. And this idea, like, you know, I completely relate to you on that front. Like I will get emails from schools and they'll be like, oh, we'd love to like for you to come and give this talk or whatever. And that it doesn't like terrify me, but it freaks me out certainly, because I'm thinking
yeah.
like, oh my God, like there's going to be a room full of people this time. When if I screw up, I can just stop recording and I can start again, and like no one can hear me. Like no one knows how many times I did that take or whatever. So I completely relate to that 100%.
Yeah, exactly. It's a lot easier to film yourself just in your room.
What has it taught you about yourself? Like being able to, you know, push yourself out of your comfort zone. Because again, and I do want to stress, like that's not an easy thing to do. So that is an amazing thing that you've managed to do that. And I think, you know, I also spoke to Jasmine Elmer, who said the same thing, that it was this element of just a little bit outside your comfort zone each time. And that then you turn around and it ends up being this huge race that you've run, as opposed
Yeah.
to this little walk that you kind of initially went out for. So what has it kind of taught you about yourself doing all of this?
Mm. I'm definitely a lot braver than I thought, which sounds ridiculous but it's thinking of when I've gone to film and there's been a few other people in the room. I would like me in school or me at uni even wouldn't have imagined speaking in front of that many people, let alone being filmed in front of that many people. And yeah, I'm a lot more brave, but I'm glad that I am, that I've like proved to myself I can be. Yeah.
So you mentioned the London Dungeon, you've mentioned all of these companies that you've worked for, which is literally the dream for some people, right? Like some people go on social media and that's like the goal, that they want to be working with those people. So how did you do that? Like, did they contact you? Did you contact them? How did that work?
Well, okay, so Find My Past contacted me to work for them, and they've done a collaboration with the National Trust. Um, and the London Dungeon, they had like this new Tudor show opening in the summer, which I was invited to. And there were loads of really cool people there. And when you're stood there, you're like, why am I here? But so I was just invited to that. And then afterwards, I went to the marketing people and I was like, can I come film with you guys? Can we do something? This would be really cool. So it's a bit of both. Like I've got to the point now where I'm so lucky that I am approached by people, but I also do put myself out there and I do approach other people myself. Because you have to make things happen for yourself. You just have to ask. And I've learned that there's no harm in asking and trying as well. Because when I started, I was like, oh my God, I can't message that person. I can't email them. I can't ask to do this. But now I'm like, oh, if I can, what's the worst that can happen? They'll say no. Okay, fine.
Literally, if the worst is no, like
Yeah.
it's actually not that big of a deal. And I'm the
Yeah.
same way. Like when I started, I was like, I'm not going to talk to anybody about collaborating. Like if they want to collaborate, they'll ask me. And then all of a sudden I started realizing like, well, people might be thinking that you're going to ask. And as soon as I started asking people, everybody was like, yeah, I would love to. And then there's the odd person that says no. But you're like, oh, that actually didn't ruin my whole day or hurt me.
Yeah.
You know, when you think before it happens, like it's going to be horrible. And then it happens and you're like, oh, that was it.
Yeah, but that's a really big lesson to learn. And I think once that like switches in your brain, you're flying.
So then working with companies is great and you approach them and everything, and that's wonderful. Presumably then there's going to be some like bartering about the actual content. Or is it that they kind of give you a profile of exactly what they want from you and you just apply your style to it?
So it depends on the company. Some of them are literally like, we have this thing we want you to mention in a video, but otherwise do your thing. Do it exactly how you would. I had one company that wanted me to do a thing for the new Napoleon film. I thought they'd be really, really specific, but they were like, we want you to do a video in your style, in your voice, so that your audience know it's your voice and just mention the film. So I just did a random history video, and that felt bizarre, doing like a 30-second random history video for this huge company. And they like, obviously you have to send it to them for approval and stuff. But they were really like, I think brands understand that people follow you because they like you, and an ad's going to go down better if it's in your voice, like if it seems like it's you. But I've never worked with anyone that's like, you must do this, it must look like this. It's just other brands have more like a stricter brand voice or like tone of voice, and you've got to get across key messages and things, which again is fine, but you just have to work it in. And that's when it feels more like an ad, because your audience are going to know that that sentence even isn't how you might say it, but the brand want you to say it that way. But I wouldn't say anyone's ever been like, not difficult, but like really outside my kind of the way I would say things, because that just wouldn't work. And I think brands know that.
And when you're working with brands as well, a question that I get asked, and I ask probably just as much as I get asked. So I'm going to ask you as well, because that's why we're here. So when brands come to you, do they come to you saying, we're going to pay you this amount? Or do they say, or, you know, maybe it's different for every single brand. Obviously, you can explain that. Or do they say something along the lines of, you know, what are your rates? Kind of a situation. Because that is always a big thing that people are wondering with social media is, how do I not price myself? That sounds really objectifying. I meant like,
I think that's the way to say it.
right? Like it
Yeah.
just sounds bad. But you know, it's like, how do I essentially come up with a price list
Yeah.
if they ask something like that? Or how do I know I'm getting taken advantage of?
Yeah, so I'm definitely still learning on that side. Some brands will, yeah, they'll ask you for your rate card, which again, not 100% sure what it is, but mine is like my name, what my like aims are, what I'm doing, where my followers are, what my audience is, and then like my rates for certain things. So they'll either ask for that, or to be honest though, I think the initial email is always like, hi, we've got this project. Do you want to chat more? And I'm always like, yes, here's my rate card, but we can discuss, which I think you're not supposed to do. Never say you're open for discussion, because then they'll like lower your price down. And they always do that anyway, which is fine. But then it feels like my rate card, I feel like is ridiculously priced, because I know that they're going to be like, nope, let's do like half of that. Whereas if I started with half of that, it would be much lower. So I've learned that you like have to
You go in
really
strong.
up. Yeah. Because they don't care. They'll just be like, no, we can only afford this. And then it's like, okay.
When it comes to all of this social media talk, the pricing, the platforms, the everything, that's all great. But what I'm curious about is you also then have a magazine. So you also work as the managing editor of the Little Historians magazine, which I would love to talk about because that's so different to everything else that you've got going on, because that is print, a print physical magazine. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I absolutely can. And I'm very impressed that you've done your research. Well done. So the Historians magazine was started by Rosie Mags, who is History with Rosie on Instagram. Not to plug anyone else on your platform, sorry, but
No,
it was
do
started
it.
by her.
We're putting the links in the description below, guys.
Yes, there we go. So she started the Historians magazine a few years ago, which was a magazine, a print magazine that lets historians get published, because obviously it's very difficult to get published and anyone can write for them. And it comes out every other month, I want to say. And they asked me to run their social media. And when I was like, it wasn't an interview, but I was chatting with them to see like what I could do with them, I mentioned that I started Helpful History because I want to write children's books. And I thought, get the name Helpful History and go from there. So that's in the process, but different story. So when I mentioned that, they were like, well, we want to launch a kids version of the magazine. Help with that. So I was like, awesome, amazing, I'd love to do that. So that launched in January this year. The first edition was the Romans, because I could write that plan like that. Because at the museum I work at, we have a lot of school visits as well, so I know like the curriculum and things. So we've done the Romans, we did Saxons versus Vikings, we've done a couple of others, and then Christmas special as well. We've got loads planned for next year as well, which is really exciting. And it's really nice to have, like you say, a print product, because that's not really done anymore. No one is producing many printed things, it's all digital. But we also do videos as well. So we have a YouTube, and I produce that side of things with Rosie. And it's really fun to work on. It's a great experience. And we're trying to get it to be like our job. We'll get there.
So you want to write kids' books?
Yes, yeah.
Tell me more. That's so adorable. Why kids' books? Like, where did that come from? Why is it that that's your target audience that you're like, I can do that really well?
Because I was gonna say I've always loved kids. That sounds so weird. But my mum's told me that she thought I was gonna do primary education and be a primary school teacher. So I think that tells you all you need to know. That was always like what I've enjoyed, and I think being able to write history books for kids would just be so much fun. And like I say, at the museum I work at, when I was front of house, I was dealing with school groups every day and having to like talk to them about history, and just seeing them be so engaged and love it so much. It's just such like a wonderful feeling and a nice experience. And yeah, I've always wanted to be an author, but I don't feel like I know I've got a degree, but I don't feel like I'm academic enough to write an academic book. And obviously, like storybooks are a whole different thing. So I thought, kids' history, I can do that.
I just have so many questions now whirling around in my head of like, have you
Go
spoken to
on,
this person?
reel 'em
Are
on.
you doing this? Like, this is so cool and so fun. So take me through then the YouTube for the magazine. Like, what's going on over there so that people can also me included, sort of get acquainted with what you guys kind of produce and the type of content that goes on there to go alongside the magazine?
So the Historians magazine, they want to start up some talks. So if you or anyone are interested, they want to do a little talk, we can get them up on YouTube. The kids one though, they go alongside every edition. So we do a few craft videos, just as professional as Blue Peter. Um, and then we do
The best.
of course, like quick fire history fact videos as well. So it's myself, History of Rosie, and Lauren Learns History. I don't know if you've seen her, but her YouTube channel is specifically for kids, and she's absolutely brilliant. So the best videos I think this year that went down well was our Anglo-Saxons versus Vikings edition. I don't know why I couldn't get that out. That came out around the time of coronation, I want to say. So we did like William the Conqueror facts, Royal Fast facts, Battle of Hastings, and they've all done quite well. But they're just really fun to film as well, because even when we're doing the crafts, we'll be like chatting about the history, and the whole thing is that the kids can have fun and make something with us, but also subconsciously learn a bit of history.
So then how do you know how to cater what you're talking about to kids? Like, for example, I know that my audience are students, so I know exactly what they want to know. And usually they're like, I mean, my metrics are 18 to 24 or the bracket just above that, and then a little bit in higher brackets. But it's mainly that sort of 18 to 24 bracket of people who come and watch my videos because they want the answer of the books that they don't want to read. I'm staring at all of you because I keep telling you to go read the book as well, please. They're really good. But so I know what works because I know exactly the information that they want in order to finish an assignment. So for you and for the team, how do you guys know like what content hits with kids? Like how do you know, like because this is what, 7 to 11-year-olds ish?
Exactly. Yes. Poo history. Toilets, farts. No.
All the basics.
The basic silly history. Each edition, I'm pretty sure we do a silly facts video, and it is that. It was like the sponge on a stick for Romans. It was, I can't even remember, but it is genuinely stuff like that. But also you could tailor your videos to kids quite easily, I think. Well, I say easily, you could, because you just changing the language slightly. And I think, as I say, my platforms, I'm quite like base level history, so I think I'm quite used to doing that anyway. But you just do it another step for kids. So I'm trying to think of an example, but I'm not going to be able to do it.
That's always the way. It's always when you're like put under the hot seat that you're like, I have like 12 examples, but I have none right now.
Yeah, right now, absolutely couldn't tell you. Okay, so it was like George III was the Mad King, and he was the gardener, known as the gardener or something, and you could explain that in a really academic way. But what we said was, did you know King George III used to go around the gardens at his palace acting like a cow, and that's why he's called the Farmer King. That's it, end of fact. That's quite amusing. Obviously it's a sad fact, but for kids that's amusing. And it's just like, you don't have to go into too much detail. Yeah, I don't know if I'm explaining myself very well.
No, you are. You absolutely are. Is this also another one of my initial like word vomit questions when all of them came to me at once? Is this sort of also spurred on by Horrible Histories as well, and having like those books? Because I used to have those magazines, which was like, I still have them, I think, and they were so fun and so interactive and so like cartoony. Like, is that also like a lot of inspiration that inspires? A lot of inspiration that inspires? What a horrible sentence. Can't think of anything else, but
I liked it.
But you know what I mean? Like, is that sort of another place that you guys kind of look to and you go, oh, okay, that did really well this time round, even though obviously Horrible History still exists and we're not trying to compete at all before anybody says that.
Well, it's not the original cast though, is it? So
That's true.
just putting that out there. Yeah, I think so, but we don't look to them like specifically now, but I think we've all, in the back of our minds, we know that's what we used to enjoy. And also like you see it on Instagram as well, like there's well, like Lauren, who we work with, that's her job is YouTube history for kids. So she knows a lot about it anyway. And it's been really great to learn from her actually, like just for my own sake, for my books. Like it's been really interesting to learn. But you can look to that and but not even necessarily like history shows, like anything on CBBC, you can see how you target kids and what kind of things are popular and what things go down well as well. And also kids are on YouTube a lot. Like I quiz my little cousins quite a lot and they're just on YouTube. Like they don't really watch telly, it's YouTube and Netflix. So at least we're on the right platform.
That's true. You know, I see like lots of, because obviously I don't have a kid or any small kids around in the family, but I see a lot of kids when they go to restaurants will always have like their parents' phone out or something, or they're watching something. So you're 100% right. That's really smart. Like a really good like a business thing that you guys have done, because I mean that's such like a niche thing that like I wouldn't have considered, for example. But it's like you guys are out there like making a name for yourself, doing this and teaming up. So getting all of your heads together as well must be so beneficial, and presumably beneficial for your book ideas as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. They're a really lovely team to work with. Yeah, it's been good fun.
So with your books, would you, we can talk hypothetically, would you want them to be like series? Would you want it to be like the Spot books were always really popular and they have been for like eons, where they're kind of a series, but they're like not really. It's like Spot goes to school and then like Spot paints something or whatever. So they kind of all, and obviously they're not that young. Like your books won't be that young.
Mm-hmm.
But what's like the idea that you would like in a crazy world want for your books?
Yeah, I mean it is a series, and I've sort of planned it as a big series through time. But I don't want to give it away on the internet because it's not published yet.
No,
So
of course not. But it's just
um,
what can then people expect? Because then, I mean, we're going
yeah.
to send everybody back to you. And hopefully, then we get a bunch of parents watching this. If I do this title correctly, which if you guys are watching, it means I have
4 kids exclamation mark at the end. Line.
in all capitals.
Yeah.
So if like parents are here and they need to know like what to expect as well to get excited about that. Like, so it is sort of, you're planning all sort of more world history, or is it still UK based history or?
So UK based just because that's what I know and I'm confident that I can tell the story of. Because again, this is the thing on my socials, I'll get asked to talk about different cultures' history that I know nothing about. And I'm like, I'm the wrong person to tell this story. And I don't know if that's the right way to look at it or what, but that's just, I'm confident telling this history. So that's what I will do. And it'll go through time. It'll cover all the key stages in the school curriculum. Yeah.
So also, when it comes to, because you run the YouTube channel, you were saying, yeah, for the
With Rosie, yeah.
okay, so you look at the analytics.
Mm-hmm.
So for people who don't know, on YouTube it will say like, is your content for kids or adults? And you'll have to say yes or no. And mine's always no, please, for the love of God, this is far too violent for children. But presumably you're hitting yes.
Yeah.
You have another then YouTube channel. Does that change the analytics? Does it change the monetization? Like, what does that kind of a channel, is there any difference at all?
I mean, I think it just then pushes it to kids because there's a whole other app, YouTube Kids.
What?
Yeah. Like there's a whole other account. So it gives it to the right audience. Whereas if we press no, and all our titles are like make a Viking axe for kids, craft for kids, like that wouldn't do well if we pressed no. It's not for kids. So when you press yes, it then goes to that other. It's like another side of YouTube. I'm pretty sure, unless I've gone absolutely bananas.
No. I don't know that any of this exists because I never have to hit that button. So that was a
Yeah,
genuine question where I'm like, what
yeah.
happens when you hit this button? Turns out there's a whole
Give
other
the
app
right
I didn't know
audience.
about.
Yeah. I mean, if you want the wrong audience next time, press yes, and you'll get restricted. You'll get
YouTube will ban me. They'll be like, what is going on?
Yeah. I always press no on my channel though, but none of my content's like not appropriate for kids. It's just like I don't want it pushed on that side because it's not appropriate for kids, but it's also not.
With kids books and with writing for kids books then, and then you have all of your separate channels, and you're kind of leaning more into, I think, on Instagram and on TikTok of being more presenter, as you've used that word. And then with the kids stuff, you're leaning more into, like you said, you're the other option of being a primary school teacher. You're accessing these different sides of Katie, who is obviously the same whole. So moving forward, would you prefer to be one or the other? Like, are you using one as a vehicle for the other? Or is it like you would hope to ideally keep both of them going and keep both Katies alive?
So it started as get the name Helpful History so that your kids' books can be called that. And then obviously TikTok, that audience, as we said, 18 to 24. And it's now a bit more like I'd love to have them going, both still going, but I think they could merge because like the ultimate goal would be Helpful History as a proper show. So I'm like a history presenter, but I never talk, but when I started, I sometimes would talk about like sexuality stuff in mythology, but I don't do that anymore. So I never talk about anything like explicit or like crude. Like I just don't. So it's not necessarily, I think they could both combine. If Helpful History was a show and a book series, that's the dream, that's the goal. So I think that could be for both areas. I think that would work.
Essentially, if there are any people out there that happen to make kids' books, we have your next author right here.
I've written it, please.
So for the last little bit of the interview, I know that we've went social media, kids' books. We're going to just take it back for 1 second before the end because we haven't mentioned your Helpful History podcast. So when I said at the start of this that Katie's on everything, I truly mean that. Like you type in Helpful History anywhere, she's there. Her face is, which is wonderful. That's exactly how you should be. You're like every, content creator agent's ideal client. Like just.
Well, then where are the agents? Hit me up, please.
So tell us about your podcast because they're really short, which I really like. They're like 20 minutes long. I think one of them was maybe 30 minutes long. Maybe. Was The Witches one that long? I can't remember, but I think there was one that was a little bit longer.
You're like on it.
But they're nice and short. They're really concise. They're really put together. And you had some great stats, which is why I wanted to bring it up. Because when we had this whole Spotify Wrapped, you were like, what's happening?
Yeah, I was like, what? Sorry, what is going on? It's just, it was crazy. I was like the top podcast for, was it 80 people? And it was listened to. The craziest thing I find is looking at the map because I'm like, okay, UK, and then it's like Australia, Canada, it's like all over. And I'm like, that is just bonkers that people everywhere are just listening to me chat about history. And I'm so grateful. And it's just so weird. So I was like, everyone has a podcast. I may as well give it a go. But I don't listen, like you said, they're quite short. And I don't really listen to long podcasts. I just don't have that capacity in my brain. I switch off. So, and to be honest, I've tried to make my videos and podcasts longer, but I just can't because I script all my stuff. Like a 20-minute podcast is 6 or 7 pages of like typed writing, which just takes so long. So I don't actually have, I can't make them any longer without like writing a dissertation. Like it's crazy. So they're short form for those 2 reasons. But I think they go down well, like Spotify Wrapped shows, which, madness.
I think it's good because I think a lot of people aren't doing short form podcasts is very niche. Like most people use podcasts to talk for like 3 or 4 hours. I tried to keep all of my videos even like under an hour because that works for my audience. But I've had people say like, why aren't they an hour and a half? And I'm like, because when I see that one pop up and then you've got that extra set of numbers, I'm automatically like, no, I'm not listening to that. Yeah. So I'm like, it can be 59, but it can't be 1 hour. Like 59 minutes, that's fine. I'm like, yeah, I got time for that. So I totally understand what you're saying with that, because you kind of ended up tapping into this history niche again that no one else is doing, which explains why it was so popular for the Spotify Wrapped.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I think that was like you say, just because I can't deal with very, very long form stuff, but also because it takes me so long to write it and then to film it and then to edit it. The amount of platforms I try to put stuff on, it just wouldn't happen if it was all long form as well. And I think to stay sort of consistent for the audience is more important than if I was like trying to put out these really long videos. Because also that then loses the like baseline not, I keep saying baseline, I don't want to call myself that, but like I don't often do like a deep dive academic style thing. I'm very much like, here's a history thing, let's chat for a minute, cool, we're done, thanks, kind of thing. It's easier in short form, for sure.
Coming up to then the end of this, because we've been sitting down chatting and I've taken up so much of your time at the end of your super long work day. So we've gone through some advice for people in general, but I think it would be nice, I guess, now, given all of the kids' book stuff and given all of the work that you do, to maybe gear more advice towards that. Like, what would you say to somebody who might be wanting to write kids' books or get into younger education, sort of around the age range that you are ideally going for? Like, what's the advice that you can give them of how to do that without necessarily going and being a primary school teacher?
That's a very good question. Come and join the magazine. No. Well, yeah, things like that. If you want to write, find some sort of place to write for. You don't have to be a teacher. Or at the museum. Museums have school trips all the time. You can volunteer in their workshops. We have volunteers in the workshops all the time. So they're not the teacher, but they're there in the classroom. They're engaging with the kids and the education side in it. That's really nice to see. Or like living history festivals are always fun, and they always have like kids tents. So even if you wanted to like chat to the people there, see what they do, they're probably museum educators or they run like the crafts groups and things. They'll be interesting to speak to as well. People at the kids tent at living history festivals. I know that's a really weirdly niche thing, but someone will know what I'm talking about.
Well, Katie, that's a lovely piece of advice to end on. I really appreciate how open and how forthcoming you've been throughout this conversation, not only with your own aspirations, but also with your advice. I think it's really rare to find somebody who is so willing to give so much advice. And I know that so many people are going to listen to this and get so much out of it. And that's all thanks to you, because all I did was really navigate around you. So thank you so, so much. And thank you guys at home for watching and for listening. Obviously, you guys can find all of Katie's links in the description below, as I said at the start of this episode. And considering how much she gave away about being a content creator, you guys should definitely go and give her a follow, subscribe to her YouTube, and check out her podcast to support her. Thank you guys so much, and we'll be seeing you next time with more videos here on Moan Inc. So I'll see you guys then.